You know how I say often that capitalism is ecocidal? Well, this is an example of that. Also, our non-veganism is an example of ecocidal behavior as well as violence towards other sentient beings. These are two things I talk about. And imperialism, which is inextricably linked with capitalism, that is also contributing now to something that is really now the death knell for the planet. If there was ever a sign that there is there are a few signs, but this is a major one, along with the releasing of methane from the East Siberian Arctic shelf due to the warming of the planet. But this is something that is due to our non-veganism, our not being vegan, our eating animal products, that's meat, dairy, fish, eggs, etc., directly a result of that. And it's also a result of capitalism and imperialism, because they go together, where we've basically now, the US empire has installed so many right-wing fascistic figures like Bolsonaro, and is continuing to do that for their capitalist aims. This is why we have what we have. So when the Amazon rainforest now is emitting more carbon dioxide than it is able to absorb, scientists have confirmed for the first time. And I spoke about this a couple of years ago, and they were expecting it to be 10 years before this happened, before the Amazon rainforest was no longer a heat sink, a carbon sink. But that's actually it's actually happened much faster, which is part of this whole feedback loop that is happening now. The emissions amount to billions of tons of carbon dioxide a year, according to the study. The giant forest has previously been a carbon sink, absorbing the emissions driving the climate crisis, but now is causing its acceleration, researchers said. Most of the emissions are caused by fires, many deliberately set to clear land for beef and soy that actually is most of the soy that's produced in the Amazon rainforest is to feed animals in animal feedlots all over the world. So, it's to clear land for beef and soy production. But even without fires, hotter temperatures and droughts mean the southeastern Amazon has become a source for CO2 rather than a sink. Growing trees and plants have taken up about a quarter of all fossil fuel emissions since 1960, with the Amazon playing a major role as the largest tropical forest. Losing the Amazon's power to capture CO2 is a stark warning that slashing emissions from fossil fuels is more urgent than ever, scientists said. Now, this is the problem. And, if you follow this channel, if you haven't followed this channel, you may not be aware that of the most recent study to date, 114 countries, 40,000 farms, from farm to fork, 90% of all we eat. This is the largest study, the largest scientific study to date, that the solution is to adopt a plant-based diet, a diet free of eggs, dairy, meat, etc., fish, etc., to address the climate crisis. That's what they discovered from this largest study to date. And no, it wasn't done by vegans. It was done by scientists. The study, published in the journal Science, created a huge data set based on almost 40,000 farms in 119 countries and covering 40 food products that represent 90% of all that is eaten. It assessed the full impact of these foods from farm to fork on land use, climate change, emissions, freshwater use and water pollution, eutrophication, and air pollution, acidification. A vegan diet, a diet free of meat, dairy, eggs, is probably the single biggest way to reduce your impact on planet Earth, not just greenhouse gases, but global acidification, eutrophication, land use and water use, end quote, said Dr. Joseph Poore at the University of Oxford, UK, who led the research. Quote, "It is far bigger than cutting down on your flights or buying an electric car," end quote, he said, as these only cut greenhouse gas emissions. Quote, "Avoiding meat and dairy products is the single biggest way to reduce your environmental impact on the planet, according to the scientists behind the most comprehensive analysis to date of the damage farming does to the planet. The new research shows that without meat and dairy consumption, global farmland use could be reduced by more than 75%, an area equivalent to the US, China, European Union, and Australia combined, and still feed the world. Loss of wild areas to agriculture is the leading cause of the current mass extinction of wildlife." That's also from the same study. Now, I mention this ad nauseum, hoping that people who watch this channel will consider going vegan. Now, I don't know if that happens. I know that since I've been doing vegan education, since 2005. That's when I became vegan. It was probably more towards the beginning of 2006 I decided to do vegan education. And way back then, the vegans I knew, we were talking about this issue of the climate crisis in relation to animal product consumption. And of course the main reason to be vegan, since veganism is an ethical position, is to go vegan for sentient animals, because they're not our property, they're not things, they're not our resources, they're sentient animals. And 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals are tortured and killed every year for trivial reasons and mostly palate pleasure. So, we are engaging in something that's not only tremendous violence towards other sentient beings, but it's actually now escalating our demise. And it seems like people value their palate pleasure over our sort of being able to survive on the planet, and other animals, who of course are as important as we are. It's only that we have this human supremacist attitude that we think they're not as important as we are. They're morally as important as we are. And it doesn't matter that they're not like us or they're like us. That's irrelevant. They're sentient animals. They are just like we are animals. They have different likes and dislikes. They have different ways of being in the world, and that's totally fine. Just like it's totally fine that we have different human beings that look different from each other, that have different ways of being, that have different values, and they have different. They don't want to participate in this ecocidal system we have going here, capitalism, and that's totally fine. And that's why we have U.S. empire trying to invade and destroy countries that, like Cuba and like Venezuela and Bolivia and places like that, that are trying to use the economy for the people instead of, using the economy to just make more money and upward transfers of money. But now we have a situation where they talked about a tipping point a couple of years ago in relation to the Amazon rainforest, which I talked about a year and a half ago. And yet the tipping point was supposed to be 10 years away, and then it was 2 years, and now it's here. I'm going to leave some links, and you can read what they say about this. There's 2 or 3 articles, and does anybody ever talk about maybe going vegan in these articles? No. They're looking to the powers that be, who are, really psychopaths in a way, or sort of sociopaths, that they would rather line their pockets than do anything to actually save what's left of this planet, what's on the planet. The Earth's going to go on without us, but basically save the current ecosystems and all that actually will help us survive, and also that the animals in those ecosystems have a right to be able to survive without being pushed further and further and further and further into extinction. And we're on the front lines of the 6th mass extinction. This is why people don't seem to realize that we are animals. We may be wearing different clothes, and we may think we're all fancy with driving tons of steel around, and we're, flying in tons and tons and tons of steel, and we're able to do this and that, and we have little devices that, we can communicate with people on the other side of the world. We think we're so clever, and look what we've done. I don't actually see, unless there's some sort of miracle that happens now. I didn't expect this. Like in 2013, I realized it was all over for us. I'm sorry if anybody finds that difficult to hear, but I felt like it was all over for us in 2013 because there was methane escaping from the East Siberian Arctic Shelf, and it's a feedback loop. There's all sorts of positive feedback loops that happen, just like this is going to escalate more and more with the Amazon rainforest, and it's basically going to turn into a savanna. It's going to be releasing billions of tons of carbon dioxide, because we've basically upset that area so much now that it's actually going to destroy itself because of heat and everything else. And we've got wet bulb situations happening around the world now, where the humidity is so high and the temperature that the human body cannot cool down. And let's not forget that there's animals that have to deal with this too. The human body cannot cool down, and so people just die spontaneously. That's happening now around the world. Temperature's so hot, look at what happened in Canada recently. This all related, what's happening in the Amazon and what's happening now with wet bulb situations and now warming of the ocean. Watch Seaspiracy. It's a documentary that's showing how we're absolutely outrageously destroying the oceans mostly because of our non-veganism. That's what it's all about. eating fish and other animal products from the ocean. That's what's causing the destruction of the ocean. Can you see where this is all connected? So basically, our exploitation and killing and destruction of other sentient animals is going to be our own destruction. The irony in that. I mean, isn't that so apt? That we tried to enslave most of the population of the world who are non-human, and we were torturing and killing them at 1 to 3 trillion a year, and now all that is coming back now to roost, in a way. And I look at this beautiful area that I live in, and I know that one day this is probably going to be very different from what it is now. And there won't be many humans around, if any, because this is where we're at now. So you know, we can make a decision to mitigate some of the disaster that is coming. And it's coming now like a train, like a freight train at us. It was coming anyway. It was too late at 2000, really. For, you know, what was coming it was basically too late then. And governments are actually going the other way because of capitalism, neoliberalism. They're going the other way, so they're going to hasten this. And I'm not sure if they think, well, they knew we were all going to go extinct, so they want to just get as much for themselves as they can. It's an insanity, really. And they're driving the Titanic. They're basically steering the Titanic. Mixing up metaphors here, but you know what I'm saying. But there is something that we can do. I got sidetracked there, and that is we can go vegan and encourage others to go vegan, because one, animals are not our property. They're not our things. They're not our resources. They're sentient. And we know they're sentient. It's not one group of animals like dogs and cats that are sentient and the rest of them aren't. They're all sentient, and it doesn't matter if we have a relationship with them or not. They deserve the right not to be used as a thing. I don't know if I went into the amount of land that will be saved if people stopped using animals. There's literally continents. That's part of that largest study to date. Continents like Australia, the UK, China will be free to be able to plant, to be able to grow plants and grow more trees. There'll be huge amounts of land and water. I mean, it takes 1,000 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of milk. It takes 7 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of beef. And I hate to use that in terms of that, but it just sort of brings it home to people. There's a huge amounts of land and water resources and dead zones in the ocean. There's the water shortages that we're experiencing, like California and around the world now. Water shortages are going to be huge, and this is all related because, 5 acres of Amazon rainforest are being cleared every minute. That's 5 acres of Amazon rainforest are being cleared every minute to make way for grazing cows for beef production and for soy to feed animals in animal lots all over the world. 5 acres are burnt every minute. And then around the world, there's also land cleared for animal agriculture. So what are we doing? What are we doing? Do we value our taste buds over our own survival? Over the survival of other animals on the planet who deserve the right to have this planet also. It is their planet as much as it is ours. And yet we have destroyed it for them. And now we're driving them to extinction. And like I say, we're on the front lines of the 6th mass extinction. I'm sorry if this sounds a bit preachy, but I've been talking about this for years now. Years. 15 to 16 years now. I see people, particularly on the left, wringing their hands about the climate crisis, the climate emergency, which now is almost, you could say, it's like a runaway global warming. And there's no sign, barely a sign that anybody's talking about being vegan, going vegan. There's barely a sign from governments that they're doing anything at all. And then you get people vilifying certain public figures who are talking about the climate crisis and making out like they're trying to line their pockets with green technology. I mean, what a shit show. What a shit show. You couldn't make this up. If somebody said to me like 40 years ago when I was just getting into the workforce, actually it was more than 40 years ago, I was just getting into the workforce, and they said to me, you know, in about 42 years, 43 years, you're going to be in a situation where basically people are so distracted and trying to distract themselves, and governments are so crazy that you're basically heading towards extinction. And here we are worrying about, I know that Britney Spears deserves to have her own agency, etc., but I mean, here we've got people protesting for Britney Spears. We've got people doing stupid reality TV shows and cooking shows, and we've got governments trying to overthrow countries that are trying to do the right thing by their own citizens, like in Cuba right now. We've got the U.S. empire trying to meddle in everything that's going on, every country that hasn't submitted to them, and trying to basically destroy them so that and sanction them till they're dying by the thousands, like in Venezuela. We've got the Fourth Estate propping all that up. They're like arms of the national security state. I mean, there's this drive towards basically this full spectrum dominance by the US empire, and we're all just being, if we're not speaking out against it, if we're not aware of it and we're not speaking out against it, it just goes on unabated, as it has, particularly since World War II, with the CIA helping overthrow 50 plus governments. Now this is where it leads to the other problem. There's our non-veganism, eating animal products, meat, dairy, eggs, fish, etc. Watch Cowspiracy, watch Seaspiracy, and watch What the Health. Those 3 documentaries. Watch them all, and then get back to me. And the other problem is, apart from capitalism, which I say is inextricably linked with imperialism, which is what Lenin said, we have US imperialism, which the US military is this is one of the greatest polluters on the planet. And this is where I wanted to mention Abby Martin's latest film that they are creating, Mike Preisner and Abby Martin from the Empire Files. It's called Earth's Greatest Threat. I think that's the name of it. And I'm going to show you a clip.
There's no longer any debate to be had. Our planet is on a collision course with disaster.
Urgent warnings.
Dangerous, record-breaking heat.
We're now living in the early stages.
Terrifying signs of things to come.
Mass displacement, deaths, and extinctions are already here. Whether the planet can remain habitable for human beings has become a haunting question.
Climate change protests happening right now.
Part of a global call for action.
We know there are many culprits. Corporations, policymakers, mass consumption. But what if there was one single entity that by itself will bring planetary collapse? One single organization, one single enemy, that not only produced enough toxic destruction to destroy the planet on its own, but was also subject to virtually no regulations, no oversight, no accountability, and as of yet, no blame. If there was a monster like that, shouldn't it be dragged out of the dark and into the center of the struggle to save the planet?
And it needs to be funded by the public because, as you know, they're viewer funded. But the clip, the trailer looks really good. I would like to think they threw in. I mean, I know that it's about U.S. imperialism and how the military is probably one of the biggest polluters on the planet. But I mean, in isolation, that's we need to be vegan, right? We need to be vegan. We need to be vegan and anti-imperialist. Please support that documentary. You know, Abby Martin is an excellent filmmaker. They did the Gaza Fights for Freedom. That was a really, really good documentary, and I'm sure this will be excellent. But I really think that the left now, it has to stop mucking about, stop pretending like veganism is some sort of something hard or something that we'll do after we end capitalism. Capitalism isn't responsible for our non-veganism. You know, socialist countries are non-vegan. Capitalist countries are non-vegan. This animal exploitation has been going on since we arrived on the planet. Just treating other animals like they're things, like they're resources. And people can make excuses. Oh, well, at a certain time we had to do that. Maybe that was true. Maybe there was a very small point in time where there was, ice everywhere and stuff. Whatever, I don't know. But we don't have to do it now. Whatever you think about the past is irrelevant. Whatever you think about indigenous people and what they did and what they didn't do, and the saying thanks to animals they murdered and stuff, it's all irrelevant. It's irrelevant what Inuits do. What you're doing right now is what is important. Right now. I don't think there is no excuse now to be exploiting animals and eating animal products. These sentient beings deserve not to be used as things. They deserve not to be bred into existence by the billions, to be used as things, as resources. And it's time. It's time now. If we can't take this seriously now, when can we take it seriously? If you don't care about other sentient beings, we should at least care about our own survival, yes? And I don't think that's going to happen. And to be really frank with you, and I've said this before, I don't think we deserve to continue on as a species because we are incredibly violent. Look at what we're doing to one another, not just the planet, but look what we're doing to one another. Look at the shit show that's going on right now. Look what's happening in the United States with people, basically almost homeless in a pandemic. Look at what we're doing to Venezuela, the U.S. imperialist endeavors of sanctioning Venezuela and killing people by the tens of thousands. A constant warmongering, the rape and the pillage and the patriarchy, the capitalism. What a shit show we've got going on. I don't think we deserve. We don't deserve, and we are a danger, not only to ourselves, but heaven forbid we would ever leave this planet and take our dysfunction with us into the universe. It needs to stop here. It needs to end here, because I don't see us evolving in any conscious way. People say that. I don't see it. And I feel really, really bad for babies that I see that are being born, children. I think, good God, I think heavens, why are people still having children now? Why? What kind of a world? Do they really think that some plucky young band of young people like in these Hollywood movies is going to save us? Do they think that suddenly there's going to be some sort of amazing technology? Oh, science will take care of this mess that we've got going here. Or let's go to another planet like that idiot Elon Musk and Richard Branson. People like that, billionaires, that are just playboys on the planet. They're like Lord Elon Musk and Lord Bezos and Lord Branson. Just have so much money they can just do whimsical things, send cars into space and rubbish like that. This is the sort of shit show, the sort of people we've got that have got power because they've got money because capitalism. And, good luck getting to Mars in time. One of resources we're we're running out of resources basically to do stuff like that. And he hasn't even worked out how you could actually, we haven't even worked out how to sustain ourselves in a biosphere on this planet, let alone in a hostile planet like Mars. And forget about the radiation. You'd have cancer by the time you get there, and your bones would be so brittle you'd barely be able to walk. Or basically you'd be half crippled because you wouldn't be able to do weight-bearing exercises and all sorts of things. There's all sorts of problems. There's all kinds of problems, and yet Elon Musk is leading everybody to believe that we'd be able to get to Mars in, I don't know, he seems to think sooner than later. And Richard Branson actually got money to go into space from the public. Money. He got I think it was like $200 million or something to go into space. This is the insanity. It's basically corporations running the world. It's capitalism. The people on this planet are just a joke to these oligarchs, to these billionaires, to the capitalist class, the political class. We are just a joke. We are taking up space. We have become useless eaters, like the Nazis used to call people who were disabled. We've all become useless eaters to the capitalist class. But we can do something now to mitigate, firstly, be anti-capitalist. I don't know which system is any good, but capitalism is absolutely ecocidal, and it's inherently exploitative, and it's inextricably linked with imperialism. It has to go. That's the first thing. Well, actually, the first thing would be to be vegan, right? The second thing is to be anti-capitalist, and anti-imperialist is the third thing. We have to be all those things if we can seriously call ourselves, if we seriously claim that we want to have a peaceful planet, a non-violent planet. We have to be vegan, we have to be anti-imperialist, and we have to be anti-capitalist. I'm sorry if that sounds judgy and preachy. I don't care anymore. I don't have any, there's no, I just do this channel because I was wanting to talk about, things were so crazy that I decided that I wanted to just talk about stuff. I'm not getting anything out of it really, and barely anybody sees what I talk about, but I have to say it anyway. Like, I'm so suppressed on so many social media platforms, it's beyond a joke, really. My content I'm talking about. So anyway, I suggest that we become vegan, we become anti-imperialist, we become anti-capitalist, and we be here now in the present and enjoy what we have, because it's not going to last. It's not going to last, and we only have ourselves to blame, because ultimately these people that are in power, people still vote for these people. I know voting isn't the answer. It never was. A grassroots non-violent movement is the answer. Civil disobedience is the answer, but I don't see any of that happening in the numbers we need to do anything now, and I don't even know if it would make any difference at this point. That's the tragedy of it. And one more thing I wanted to say, which you probably noticed that the Pentagon has been releasing, sort of videos and basically almost confirming that there's, life outside of this planet, which of course there is, but, for some reason we have to have beings visiting us before we start to really take it seriously. Of course, there's billions and billions of planets that would most definitely contain life. I don't know what kind of life, but most definitely. And the Pentagon's been putting out this, that there's these tic-tac, alien spacecraft or whatever have been around. And you may have seen, I don't know, in amongst all this, which I just think is a big psyop, because they want to have a space force. They want to increase the funding for the military because China and Russia and all of that. But, aliens and wanting to dominate space and all that kind of stuff. It's all part of that. It's all part of an imperialist psyop, really, is what I think. Because it could have been done, because of the way it's being rolled out, this propaganda, really. And I'm not saying that there may, the way it's being rolled out suddenly just says a lot. But I wanted to just mention this, you may have heard of this particular school in 1993 or 94, I think it was. It was in Africa. It was in Zimbabwe, and it was in a school called Rawa, I think, or Rua. And the town was Arura, I think, and the school was called Ariel School. And Ariel School, sorry. And these children in 1994, between the ages of 5 and 12, apparently there was this craft landed just on the edge of their school in amongst some trees. And these beings got out of this craft. This is sort of fairly well documented. And 60 children all saw the same thing. They all saw the craft land, and they saw these beings that were very, very thin, dressed in black. They had very large black eyes, and they basically communicated via telepathy. And one of the things they said, the thing that they communicated via telepathy with these children was that be careful of technology because it will end up basically destroying you. That's what these children said was communicated to them, but via telepathy, from these beings that got out of this craft. And then they left. And they, at the time, they didn't feel, they were frightened at the time, but then they relaxed and they were able to receive this transmission, basically.
More disturbing still was what the children told Dr. Mack about the purpose of the alien visit. It was a dire warning Mack had heard more than 100 times before from people in the United States, half a world away.
Fungi, what do you imagine is his reason for visiting Earth?
I think it's about something that's going to happen.
Something's going to happen.
Yes. What I thought was maybe the world's going to end. Maybe they're telling us the world's going to end. I think they want people to know that we're actually making harm on this world and we mustn't get too technologed.
How did that get communicated to you?
I don't really know, but it just popped up in my head.
Pollution.
Yes. He never said anything. It's just that the face has the eyes. They looked horrible.
And the eyes, the horrible look, had that information that you just told me?
Yes.
Researchers are suggesting the Ruwa sightings were created by mass hallucination. Dr. Mack hears a different story from the children.
If someone were to say, well, you just have a lively imagination and you made this up, what would you say?
I haven't been influenced by any of my friends. I have seen what I've seen.
That happened. Look it up. It happened in 1994. And, whether it actually happened or not, who knows? But it seems like there was so many children, they feel like it actually did happen. So many children experienced the same experience, basically drawing images of these particular beings, had the same story, and the story never changed from these school children, and there were 60 of them. So true, though, isn't it, in a way, whether that happened or not, that the technology, if we don't have the wisdom to use technology, if whatever whim we come up with, we create technology, like what the U.S. military does with coming up with all sorts of awful ways to kill people, etc. If we don't have the wisdom with the technology, this is the sort of mess that we end up with. So in that way, if those beings actually came from another planet and were transmitting that to children, then they were right. So I'm sorry this is not happy news, this Amazon rainforest. Just remember, 5 acres every minute are cleared for cows to graze and for soy to feed animals in animal farms all over the world. That's mostly what is happening to the Amazon rainforest. That is the main one. Then there's the timber as well. But that's the insanity, and it's all because we're not vegan.